Hello and welcome to this quick video on wildcrafting guidelines. In case you've never heard the word wildcrafting before, let's go ahead and give it a definition. So what is wildcrafting? Wildcrafting is simply gathering herbs, plants, or fungi from the wild. Pretty simple. So now that you know what wildcrafting is, let's talk about 5 important guidelines for wildcrafting. The first and probably most important is that you want to make sure that you have permission to be where you are going to be wildcrafting. You don't want to be trespassing on someone else's property. If they find you there and you're not supposed to be there, they're liable to come out of the house and be very angry with you. So make sure before you start that you have permission to be where you are. The second thing that you need to watch out for when you are wildcrafting is that you want to make sure that the environment where you are wildcrafting is free from toxins. Now, a lot of times we'll see a plant off on the side of the road and it will look like a plant that we would want to wildcraft. However, I advise you to steer clear of plants just out the side of the road because those plants collect all the smog, all the toxins, all the road dust, everything that comes off the cars that are driving by them and can make them toxic and make them something that you do not want to put on your skin or in your body. If you're just digging it up possibly to replant somewhere, that's something else. If you want it to be pretty in your garden, that might be something else. But if you're wanting to use it on your skin or in your body, stay away from anything just off the side of a road. The other thing, a lot of commonly wildcrafted plants grow in waste areas. You want to make sure that whatever you're collecting is not growing on top of a dump where there might be chemicals or other things leaching into the soil and thus into the plants that you are wildcrafting. So, guideline 2, make sure the environment where you are wildcrafting is free from toxins. Now, guideline 3, make sure you are easily able to identify the plants that you are wildcrafting. Okay, so there's a few ways to go about this. The best way is to take someone with you who knows what they're looking at and has worked with the plants and in the area before. If this is not possible, there are all sorts of great field guides out there that you can carry with you. Herb field guides and edible plant field guides, wildflower field guides. So invest in a good field guide so that you are easily able to identify the plants you're wildcrafting, because sometimes plants that are helpful to us and harmful to us can look the same, so you don't want to get these mixed up. It can have very grave consequences. So that's guideline 3. Make sure you can identify your plants. Guideline 4, only take what you need and leave enough for the plant to regrow. So this is where knowing ahead of time what you are intending to go out and wildcraft can be helpful. That way you can have an idea of how to responsibly harvest that plant. Sometimes with a root, you need to leave part of the root. Sometimes you need to leave a certain amount of the leaves or the stem for the plant to regrow. You always want to make sure that your harvest is sustainable. Okay, and there's different guidelines for different plants. So this is one you might want to research a little bit before you go out. And finally, make sure you use the proper tools and harvesting methods. So different plants are harvested in different methods. We talked about that just a second ago about leaving parts of the roots or leaving parts of the leaves. But there's also different tools that can be used for these plants. You also have to take into consideration the time of year. Certain plants are only to be harvested at certain times of the year. So that's another thing you want to make sure that you are aware of when you are harvesting. Now, these are just 5 basic guidelines for harvesting your plants. Some people make it far more complicated than this. Some people make it a lot, probably not much easier than this. This is pretty much what you need to adhere to at the most basic level. But some people do things a little bit more complicated. But if you stick to these 5 guidelines, you should be in good shape. So now we know what wildcrafting is. We know how we want to go about it. Let's talk about what we can wildcraft. So if you've never wildcrafted before, these are a few ideas to get you started. So you see all these plants here. The first one is nettles. Nettles are a good example of why it's a good idea to know how to properly harvest your plants, because nettles will sting you if you don't have the proper equipment, gloves, things like that. But they are one of the most commonly wildcrafted plants. Another one is dandelion. Dandelion's a great one to start off with because dandelions grow everywhere. Nobody's going to yell at you for taking their dandelions as long as you ask. Most people spend their time trying to get them out of their yard. The other thing about dandelions, we talk about harvesting and harvesting tools. There is actually a tool that you can buy at most local hardware stores that is specifically made to dig up dandelion roots. If you're trying to get them out of your yard, the intention is to get them out of your yard with that tool. If you're trying to harvest them, they're a great tool to use to harvest dandelions as well. Another one is elder. People often harvest elder in the fall. And the only thing with elder, you want to make sure that you're getting black elder and not red elder, because red elder is poisonous. But it grows in the country along roadsides and fence rows. So it's another one people commonly use. Fourth one is lamb's quarters, and you see that in the top right-hand corner. Lamb's quarters are a weed. They grow in people's yards. They used to grow in my old yard, and I would take them and make smoothies with them. You can also make cooked lamb's quarters like you would cook a spinach or kale. You can also put them in salads as well. So that's another good one. It's a weed. In fact, the next couple ones that we're going to talk about are weeds. So the next one is chickweed. Chickweed is another one that is commonly wildcrafted and also a weed. It grows in people's yards and they try to get rid of it, but it has a lot of really, really good properties and uses. Another one is purslane. Purslane is, again, a weed. It's a succulent, and it can be used in salads and as a pot herb to be cooked down, and it's pretty tasty. Finally, another one that you can wildcraft is plantain. And plantain is commonly used for skin issues, bites, scrapes, stings, things like that. And it is the most common plant on the entire planet. It's found everywhere. The picture in the bottom left-hand corner is broadleaf plantain, but there's also narrowleaf plantain, and they have similar properties. And both are things that people try to get out of their yards if they want to have a well-manicured yard. So those are a few that we can wildcraft. Now let's talk about what should we avoid when wildcrafting. So the first one I want to talk about that you really need to avoid when wildcrafting is ginseng. Unless you have experience harvesting ginseng, it's really best to leave it alone. In some places, you have to have a permit to do it. It is becoming endangered because the harvesting methods that are being used, that are being required by the buyers, are actually not sustainable. So the people that are harvesting are having to adhere to the requirements of the buyers, but unfortunately it's not sustainable. Another thing with ginseng is that it has to be harvested at a certain time of the year. And again, like I said, in some places you even have to have a permit to do it. And there are cases with ginseng and golden seal both. You see in the falls in our area down here in Kentucky, sometimes Georgia, Alabama areas, somebody gets arrested because they were out poaching ginseng or golden seal. So you really want to watch out with those two unless you really know what you're doing. Golden seal is pretty much the same, dealing with sustainability permits and poaching. and they're high value herbs. The buyers pay a lot of money for these things, so you find people poaching them. But you really want to stay away from them. So the next one I want to talk about is sundew, and sundew is this little plant over here in the bottom left-hand corner. It is actually a carnivorous plant. It looks like a carnivorous plant. It grows native to California area, and it is illegal to harvest. And people, of course, people do harvest it for several reasons, to put in terrariums and things like that. It is also an expectorant and an antitussive. You can actually use it for coughs and things like that. But it is endangered and it is illegal to harvest. So stay away from sundews. The other one is lady slipper. Lady slipper is actually an orchid. It's used for nerves and tooth pain, for things like muscle spasms. But again, there's some issues with the sustainability of harvest. So you really want to watch out with this one. And finally, the one I want to talk about that really sometimes gets people going is trillium. And trillium is that white flower there in the middle. And when you go in the woods, especially around here, you go in the woods, you see tons of trilliums, and you would think that it would be sustainable to harvest. But the thing about trilliums is that it takes them a very long time to grow. So what you might seem to think are a lot of trilliums have taken a very long time to get there. And if you were to harvest those, it would take a very long time for them to grow back. So harvesting them is really not sustainable, even though it might look like it is. It's truly, truly not. And people get really upset about this. Occasionally you'll see on a group discussion board, somebody went out and they're so proud of their trillium harvest, and inevitably somebody jumps on them and tells them just how unsustainable it is. So that's one you want to watch out for as well. So those are some things that you can wildcraft, some things that you should avoid while wildcrafting. I encourage you to get out there and start wildcrafting. It's really important that we learn how to identify these plants, and the only way to do that is to get out there in the wild and look at them. We're actually losing that ability. In fact, many botany students can't identify plants in the wild anymore because everything is done so much in a lab anymore. So this is me encouraging you to get out there, learn the plants, learn to identify them, and learn to wildcraft and have fun while doing it. So I wish you a happy wildcrafting, and thank you for watching. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.